The Candyman, when a father turned Halloween into a nightmare. Welcome, dear listener. Tonight's bedtime story begins softly, as all peaceful nights do. Consider this not just a sleep story, but a relaxing story, a guided sleep meditation to gently lead you into the coziest and most magical space where comfort and calm flow like autumn air. This is Evelyn Blackwood. Blackwood, and you are listening to Midnight Murmurs Radio Air. Tales begin in serenity but often wander into the shadows of history. So before we step inside tonight's story, I invite you once again, lie back, feel the weight of the blankets around you. Take a slow breath in and let it drift out. Imagine yourself sinking deeper, as if the world itself is exhaling with you. Now picture a small American neighborhood on the last evening of October. The air carries the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Porch lights glow golden, their warmth flickering against carved pumpkins with crooked smiles. Children wander the sidewalks, dressed as tiny witches, pirates, and cowboys, their laughter a melody carried on the breeze. Candy bags rustle, dogs bark at the excitement. The whole scene feels timeless, peaceful, like a painting hung in memory. This is the Halloween most people remember: cozy, calming, almost magical. A night that feels like a gift for both children and parents, wrapped in tradition. But as the lantern light shimmers on fences and windows, there are other stories hidden in the folds of this celebration. Stories that do not rest. Stories that breathe beneath the mask of joy. Tonight, we step closer. Imagine you are walking down a quiet, suburban street, where every house seems the same. Trimmed lawns, white fences, welcoming porch. You reach one home where the light shines a little brighter, the bowl of candy waiting a little fuller. The air feels safe, yet something inside whispers for you not to linger. Here lives a father, known to neighbors as ordinary, perhaps even dull. He laughs with the children, hands out sweets with an easy smile. Parents nod politely, unaware that behind that smile lies a darkness unspoken, a darkness that Halloween night would uncover in the most horrifying way. But not yet. For now, you are still safe. The sound of crickets hums at the edge of the lawn. The cool air brushes your cheeks. The children's laughter still rings, and yet listen carefully. Beneath the harmony, there is a silence waiting, like a hidden breath no one dares release. This is the dual face of Halloween. By day and by evening's first glow, it is festive, calming, peaceful, a guided sleep meditation painted across American streets. But as the night deepens, masks begin to feel heavier and shadows stretch longer. History tells us that not all doors on Halloween open to kindness. Some open to tragedy. The man who would later be remembered as the Candyman was, in many ways, unremarkable. A father, a husband, someone the community barely noticed. Yet on this particular Halloween, he held something in his hand that should have been safe, candy, sweet and innocent. But instead, it was a key that would unlock nightmares, tear open trust, and leave a scar that generations would remember. The story you're about to hear drifts between calm and terror, between the warmth of childhood tradition and the chill of betrayal. Tonight, I will walk with you through the streets of that night, step by step. We'll listen to the laughter, feel the safety, and then ever so slowly sense the shadow growing larger. So, as you rest here, sinking deeper into calm, let the images surround you, the coziest blanket, the most peaceful air, the magical calm of a sleep story wrapping around you. And in this stillness, we begin to wander toward the house where Halloween itself turned from joy into nightmare. Because sometimes, dear listener, even the sweetest candy hides the bitterest truth. Asterisk, when we left our bedtime story, the night air was still calm, and the laughter of children still echoed down the street. This sleep story has carried us gently, like a relaxing story meant to soothe the mind, almost like a guided sleep meditation for the weary heart. Yet beneath the stillness, a shadow waits, patient and silent. The father, at the center of tonight's tale, though his neighbors knew him only as Mr. O'Brien, lived in a modest home. From the outside, it looked like any other suburban house in Texas. Pale siding, a square lawn, a porch with tired paint. The sort of place no one notices us. The kind of home that blends into the neighborhood like a whispered dot. By day, Ronald seemed harmless, even dull. He went to church on Sundays, wore simple suits, and worked a job that never paid enough. To other parents, he was unremarkable, someone you might nod to at the grocery store, someone whose name you might forget even after shaking his hand. His children, Timothy and Elizabeth, were bright-eyed and eager, just like every other child excited for Halloween. They dressed in costumes, dreamed of candy, and trusted their father completely. But what most did not know was that Ronald's life was crumbling. Debt weighed on him like a stone pressing against his chest. Bills piled up, jobs slipped away, and whispers of failure followed him. In the stillness of night, when the house was dark and the children asleep, he would sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at numbers that never added up, prayers that never seemed to be answered. It is here, in the quiet despair of a man drowning in his own failures, that the mask of Halloween becomes more than a costume. Ronald began to imagine a way out, a way so dark, so unthinkable, that it would forever change the way parents saw this holiday dot. But for now, imagine only the surface. Picture the children as they prepared for Halloween that year, costumes folded neatly, little voices asking about which streets they would visit, which houses might give the best candy. The innocence of their questions floated like warm light in the room. Their father smiled, nodding, playing the role of the dependable parent. To them, he was safe, their world, their guide through the autumn night. As you lie here, let yourself feel that strange contradiction, the coziness of family life, the peaceful rhythm of children's laughter, the magical calm that every sleep story seems to promise. And yet, just beneath it, something uneasy, like a curtain drawn over a window, where the shadow of a figure lingers too long. Neighbors who saw Ronald that evening never suspected. It was Polite, a man who blended into the holiday cheer. Parents watched their children run ahead in costume, their bags filling with sweets, their joy untouched. But in Ronald's pocket, there was something else. a secret he carried with him, silent and hidden, waiting for its moment. You see, this is where Halloween becomes not just a night of masks, but a mirror for human darkness. For Ronald, candy was not simply a treat, it was a disguise, a way to mask something far more dangerous, far more final. As we walk deeper into this story together, let your breath remain slow, steady, calm. This is still a relaxing story, still a guided sleep meditation of sorts, but one woven with shadows. Allow the words to drift like falling leaves, soft, gentle, and yet carrying you step by step toward the darker truths of that night. The children could not know, the neighbors could not see. Even Ronald's wife did not understand what lingered in his heart, but history remembers. And tonight, so do we. The house grows quiet now. The children sleep in their beds, their costumes laid out for the next evening's adventure. Their father sits at the table, staring once more at the numbers, at the future he cannot control. His hands tremble, but his eyes hold a terrible stillness. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the reach of prayer, the Candyman begins to take shape. Halloween night arrived with a softness, like a dream woven from candlelight and autumn air. For many, this was the coziest time of the year. The smell of pumpkin spice drifting from kitchens, the gentle crunch of leaves beneath small feet, the distant laughter of children. In this way, the evening felt like a bedtime story unfolding across the streets, a sleep story carried by the wind itself. The sidewalks filled with tiny witches, skeletons, princesses, and soup. Their voices blended into a cheerful chorus, each trick or treat rising like a playful song. Porch lights glowed, jack-o'-lanterns flickered, and houses stood like beacons of warmth. Parents trailed behind, smiling, their hearts lightened by the sight of their children running door to door. This was, to many, the most relaxing story of all, a guided sleep meditation painted not with words, but with the rituals of tradition. Among them walked Timothy and Elizabeth, Ronald's children. Timothy's eyes sparkled as he clutched his candy bag, his costume slightly too big but worn proudly. Elizabeth skipped at his side, her giggles carrying into the night. Behind them, Ronald kept his measured pace, his hands tucked in his coat pockets, his gaze steady. To the children, he was simply their father, two neighbors. He was just another parent. But the night carried whispers. Somewhere beneath the laughter, there was a silence. Somewhere within the sweetness, a bitterness waited. The group moved from house to house. Doors opened, candies poured into bags, and smiles were exchanged. The rhythm of Halloween was soothing in its familiarity, almost like the rhythm of breathing in a guided sleep. Meditation: inhale joy, exhale fear, inhale laughter, exhale night. Yet within this rhythm, Ronald's thoughts strayed. He reached into his pocket, feeling the weight of the candy he had prepared. They looked no different from the others, brightly wrapped, sweet to the eye, innocent to the touch. No child could have known the difference. To them, candy was magic, a promise of happiness. To Ronald, it was something else entirely. Picture it with me now. Timothy's small hand reaching out, the crinkle of the wrapper, the delight in his face. A father's hand offering what should be a gift. a gesture of love. But in that moment, love had been replaced by something darker, colder. Yet the night itself did not pause. The stars shone. The wind carried laughter. Children's footsteps pattered against the pavement. It was all so calm, so peaceful, so magical-like. A sleep story wrapping the neighborhood in comfort. And yet, one family's nights had begun to fracture in silence. Ronald walked on, his smile thin, his heart colder than the October wind. Neighbors waved. Children shouted. Doors closed. Candy bags grew heavier. Each moment passed as if nothing unusual could ever happen here. But history would remember differently. Because somewhere between one house and the next, innocence was exchanged for something far more sinister. Candy, the symbol of joy, had been reshaped into the mask of betrayal, and Timothy, clutching his treasures, could not know the danger nestled quietly in his bag. As you rest here, listening, let yourself feel the stillness between the lines, the coziest scene, the most peaceful tradition. The magical calm of children's laughter, it is all still here, surrounding you like a blanket. But beneath it lies a question. How well do we ever know the faces we trust? How often does sweetness conceal something bitter? Tonight's guided sleep meditation carries you through streets where laughter mingles with shadow, where safety stands beside betrayal. And as the night deepens, the figure of the Candyman grows clearer, step by step, like a shape emerging in fog. For now, let the image settle. Timothy smiling, Elizabeth skipping, Ronald walking quietly behind. A perfect Halloween picture until history turned it into a nightmare. Asterisk, the walk home was filled with the rustle of candy bags and the quiet satisfaction of a night well spent. The children skipped up the driveway, their voices high with excitement, their arms heavy with sweets. Inside the house, the warmth of electric light spilled across the room, chasing away the October chill. It was, in every way, the perfect closing chapter to a Halloween evening, like a bedtime story wrapping itself neatly before sleep. Ronald set his coat aside, watching as Timothy and Elizabeth emptied their bags across the floor. Candy spilled out in colorful waves, chocolates, caramels, lollipops, and the crinkling wrappers of treasures carefully chosen by strangers at each door. The children's eyes shone as they sorted their favorites into small piles, giggling, trading, making promises to save certain pieces for tomorrow. This was the part of Halloween every child loved most, the quiet joy after the excitement, the magical moment of ownership and reward. To anyone watching, it would have seemed the most relaxing story of all, a guided sleep meditation of childhood, where the night winds fade, the pumpkins glow softly outside, and the home becomes a safe haven of peace. But Ronald's eyes lingered. He moved closer, sifting through the candy with an absent smile, his fingers brushing against the wrappers. And then he paused. With deliberate care, he chose a piece. A pixie stick's long and familiar, the kind of treat any child would delight in. He handed it to Timothy, his voice calm, steady, almost tender. "Here, son," he said, "this one's for you." Timothy's face lit. with gratitude. To him, it was just candy, just sweetness, just love. He unwrapped it with eagerness, the powder spilling like fine sugar. He lifted it to his lips, unaware of anything beyond the moment, the innocence of trust, unbroken, absolute. But as the powder touched his tongue, the world began to shift. At first, there was only confusion, a strange bitterness, a taste that didn't belong. His smile faltered. His small voice whispered something about it tasting wrong. His father watched, silent. His mother leaned closer, concern flickering in her eyes. And then it began, the pain, the sudden, violent sickness that no child should ever know. Timothy clutched his stomach, his face pale, his body racked with spasms. The laughter that had filled the house only minutes before was replaced with panic. His sister's wide eyes filled with fear. His mother's hands shook as she tried to help. Ronald stood still in that moment. The cozy home no longer felt safe. The magical glow of Halloween dimmed. The air thickened with dread. What had been a sleep story, a peaceful night meant to end in warmth and rest, twisted into a nightmare before their very eyes. The ambulance was called. Neighbors would later recall the flashing red lights, the frantic voices, the sight of a small boy carried away under the weight of horror. The street that had been alive with laughter only an hour before now stood silent, haunted. Parents clutched their own children tighter. Candy bags were suddenly suspicious, heavy with doubt. And Timothy never came home. As you lie here listening, let yourself breathe slowly. The story carries you like a guided sleep meditation, yet within its calm is the echo of history. A father's hand had given a gift, and within that gift was betrayal. Candy, the symbol of joy, had become the vessel of death. This is the truth of the Candyman, the shadow hidden beneath the coziest traditions. Halloween was no longer the same. What had once been magical and calming became tinged with fear, suspicion, and grief. The night faded, but the memory did not, and so we arrive at the edge of the nightmare where innocence met its end. The morning after Halloween, the neighborhood woke to a silence that felt heavier than any autumn fog. The porches that only hours before had glowed with jack-o'-lanterns now seemed dim. The laughter of children replaced by whispers. Parents stood at windows, watching their own children closely, candy bags untouched. The joy of the night before turned to dread. The news of Timothy's death spread quickly, carried in hushed voices and shaken expressions. At first, no one wanted to believe it. How could a night so magical, so peaceful, end in tragedy? Halloween was supposed to be a bedtime story for childhood, itself a relaxing story of laughter, costumes, and sweets, a kind of guided sleep meditation for communities where everyone felt safe under the same October sky. But now, every wrapper seemed suspicious, every piece of candy dangerous. The police arrived, their cars parked outside the O'Brien home, lights flashing against the pale morning. Neighbors gathered at a distance, arms folded tightly, their faces pale. Children clung to their mothers, asking quiet questions that no parent wanted to answer. Fear settled into the street, like a chill wind. Detectives began to collect evidence. Candy was taken from homes, sorted, examined. The very symbol of Halloween, sweet, innocent, comforting, was now treated like poison. Families poured out the contents of their children's bags, watching with horror as the police bagged them as evidence. It was no longer a celebration. It was a crime scene. Inside the O'Brien home, grief hung like a shadow. Timothy's mother sat trembling, her face pale, her hands folded against her lips, as though prayer could undo the night. Elizabeth, too young to understand fully, only knew that her brother was gone, that something precious had been taken. Ronald, meanwhile, spoke softly to detectives, his words careful, his face arranged into lines of sorrow. He told them Timothy had eaten a pixie sticks, that it had tasted strange, that nothing else made sense. The detectives nodded gravely. They knew what this meant. If a poisoned candy had been given out on Halloween, then every child in the city could be at risk. What if there were more? What if other families had already taken the deadly gift into their homes? The fear spread like wildfire. News outlets rushed to broadcast warnings. Anchors looked into cameras with grave faces, telling parents to throw away their children's candy. Hospitals received frantic calls. Police hotlines rang endlessly. The nation watched as the most innocent ritual of childhood was transformed into a symbol of horror. And in the center of it all was Ronald, grieving and helpful in every way he could appear. He walked with officers, retraced his children's steps, pointed to the houses they had visited. Each door was knocked on. Each family questioned, but nowhere did they find another poisoned treat. Only Timothy's bag carried the tainted pixie stix. As you lie here, resting, breathe slowly and deeply. Let the story guide you like a guided sleep meditation. Inhale, calm. Exhale, fear. Let yourself drift into the images of the neighborhood, the leaves falling softly, the porches standing still. Yet within this calm, remember the shadow that lingers. Parents began to whisper among themselves. Could it have been an accident, a cruel stranger, or something else, something closer to home? Halloween was no longer safe. Trust itself was cracking, even in daylight. The neighborhood felt haunted. The story of Timothy's final Halloween was no longer just one family's grief. It became a legend whispered across America, changing the way parents viewed October 31st forever. Candy, once the sweetest symbol of innocence, now carried the taste of fear, and still the Candyman walked among them, smiling, waiting. The days after Timothy's death unfolded with a strange quiet. Houses along the street dimmed their porch lights early, as though the glow of a jack-o'-lantern might invite something dark to return. Parents still whispered, children still asked questions, and the O'Brien home remained the silent center of it all. Ronald appeared sorrowful, his shoulders heavy, his voice soft when neighbors came to offer condolences. He spoke of Timothy as though weaving a bedtime story, choosing words that wrapped grief in gentle tones. Yet, behind the words, there was something that never quite rang true, something detectives noticed, even as others missed it. As the investigation deepened, the police examined every piece of candy collected that night. They traced the family's steps, house by house, door by door, and still only Timothy had received the poisoned pixie sticks. None of the other children had been harmed. Not Elizabeth, not the neighbors. Just Timothy. Detectives began to ask questions more carefully. Ronald's story seemed rehearsed, almost too precise. He said the children had grown impatient, had rushed ahead. He said he handed Timothy the pixie sticks himself, encouraging him to try it. But his words, when repeated, shifted slightly. A detail misplaced here, another added there. It was as if the story itself resisted him, fraying at the edges like a lullaby gone sour. Meanwhile, fear spread through Houston like a cold wind. Parents tossed away entire bags of candy, unable to trust what once brought joy. Halloween, once a relaxing story shared with family, became a cautionary tale. Television anchors told parents to remain vigilant. Hospitals kept their doors open late. The air itself seemed poisoned by suspicion. Detectives returned to Ronald with more questions. Why? They asked. Had he chosen that particular candy for Timothy? Why had he been the only one to see the pixie sticks handed out? And why, in the midst of tragedy, had he made calls to his insurance company so swiftly? Those details were not public knowledge. Not yet. But the pieces were forming. Ronald had recently taken out life insurance policies on his children. Policies that now, with Timothy gone, would pay him thousands of dollars. The suspicion shifted like a shadow creeping closer. Ronald's demeanor, once pitied, now unsettled those around him. His calm tongue, his careful answers, began to feel less like grief and more like performance. Detectives marked his every pause, his every glance. The man who once stood at the center of sympathy was slowly becoming the center of doubt. As you breathe slowly now, let the story move through you like a guided sleep meditation. Inhale the stillness. Exhale the unease. Rest in the images of quiet suburban streets, where houses stand dark against the sky. Feel the way suspicion curls in the air, soft but inescapable. Neighbors whispered more openly. They asked each other, could a stranger really have slipped such a deadly gift into Timothy's bag? Or was the horror closer than anyone wanted to believe? The police followed the trail quietly, gathering evidence piece by piece. Bank records, insurance papers, witness statements. What had seemed like tragedy now began to reveal itself as design. And still, Ronald played the part of grieving father. He held his daughter close. He bowed his head in church. He walked through the neighborhood with his shoulders stooped low, as though the weight of grief pressed him into the earth. But when the detectives looked into his eyes, they no longer saw only sorrow. They saw calculation. The sleep story you are drifting through now is no gentle tale. It is a reminder that beneath even the calmest surface, shadows may wait. That trust, once broken, cannot easily be rebuilt. Ronald O'Brien was no longer only a father. He was now the man the press would soon call something darker. A name whispered like a curse. The Candyman? And the legend had only just begun. The investigation pressed forward like a slow tide, creeping into every corner of Ronald O'Brien's life. The quiet man who once seemed burdened by grief was now shadowed by suspicion. Each day brought a new question, a new piece of evidence, and the walls around him began to close in. Detectives spoke with neighbors, colleagues, even his pastor. What they found was unsettling. Ronald was deep in debt, his work unstable, his finances unraveling. The insurance policies, signed so recently, now seemed less like protection and more like a plan. The story was no longer confined to Houston. Newspapers picked up whispers. Television anchors began their solemn reports. They spoke carefully at first an investigation, a possibility, a father under scrutiny, but beneath the cautious tone, the narrative was taking shape. The father was no longer only grieving. The father might have been the cause. Children lay in their beds at night, clutching their blankets, listening as their parents spoke in hushed voices beyond closed doors. Candy bowls sat untouched, the colorful wrappers now little more than silent threats. The simplest pleasures of childhood had been stripped bare, leaving fear in their place. In your own breathing now, imagine the rhythm of that fear. Inhale softly, exhale gently. Let the tension ease from your shoulders even as you step deeper into this bedtime story. This is not merely a relaxing story. It is a guided journey through shadows, one where the ordinary is revealed to be extraordinary in its danger. Reporters gathered outside the O'Brien home, their cameras flashing in the night, microphones thrust forward, questions hurled into the cool autumn air. Did you know your son was poisoned? Do you believe the killer is still out there? Ronald, what do you say to those who doubt your story? Ronald gave soft answers, always soft. He bowed his head, shook his shoulders with rehearsed grief. But even the cameras seemed to catch the stiffness in his gestures, the hesitation behind his eyes. The public, once sympathetic, now leaned back in unease. And then it happened. One headline, bold and stark, appeared on a Houston front page. 3 words that would echo through decades. The Candyman. The name was sticky, terrifying, unforgettable. It was repeated on radios, whispered in grocery store aisles, written into the fabric of Halloween itself. No longer was Ronald Bryan seen as the father of Timothy. He was the Candyman, the man who had turned a night of magic into a nightmare. The legend began to grow faster than the facts. Parents spoke of other cases, some real, many imagined. Razor blades in apples, needles in chocolate bars, a faceless evil said to lurk behind every door. The truth was already dark enough, but the legend spread wider, shaping a generation's fear. Detectives moved with patience. They collected the pixie sticks from every child who had received one that night. They laid the candy side by side, as though arranging pieces of a puzzle. In each, they found the same deadly signature, potassium cyanide, enough to kill not just a child, but an adult within minutes. The evidence drew tighter. Ronald's debt, his desperation, his life insurance, his shift in story, his presence as the sole link between Timothy and the poisoned candy. It was as though the darkness he had tried to conceal was now illuminated beneath a relentless light. Even as you breathe now, slowly, gently, remember, this is still a sleep story, a guided sleep meditation meant to cradle you as you rest. Let the weight of the day fall away. Yet in this calm, allow yourself to glimpse the shadows that move beneath the surface of ordinary life. By the time November came, Ronald was no longer a grieving father in the eyes of the police. He was their suspect. The circle had closed. The Candy Man had stepped from whispered legend into brutal reality. And still, the story was far from over. Asterisk, the autumn leaves still clung to their branches as the chill of November swept across Houston. Streets that had once echoed with children's laughter on Halloween now lay quiet, heavy with memory. Parents peered out windows, candy bowls abandoned, the joy of the holiday forever altered. Even in the calm, a tension lingered, like a shadow stretching across the familiar landscape. The arrest of Ronald O'Brien unfolded slowly, methodically. Police arrived early in the morning, their boots crunching on frost-tipped leaves, a soft yet deliberate rhythm. They approached the home, knock after knock, until the door opened to the man now known across the nation as the Candy Man. He walked with measured calm, almost as though he were still performing the role of grieving father. His eyes, however, betrayed a different story. Kalilitada, quiet that unsettled even seasoned officers. Neighbors gathered cautiously, observing from safe distances. Conversations paused as cameras recorded the arrest, capturing the ordinary home transformed into a stage 4 national horror. For many, the streets felt less like a safe community and more like the setting of a sleep story turned dark, where the magic of Halloween had been replaced by the whisper of betrayal. Inside the O'Brien home, detectives began the careful cataloging of evidence. Candy wrappers, insurance policies, receipts. Small item told a story of preparation and intent. The quiet calm of the morning was punctuated by the soft scratching of pens, the shuffle of papers, and the low murmur of officers discussing evidence. Even in this activity, there was a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm, like a guided sleep meditation gone awry, lulling the mind while the truth unfolded in small, terrible details. Across the nation, news outlets carried the story with increasing urgency. Anchors spoke with measured voices, yet the words themselves carried weight. A Halloween nightmare, they said, a father under suspicion. The Candy Man, the 3 words spread like wildfire, embedding themselves into the public consciousness. Parents everywhere began to examine their own traditions with a new wariness. Trick-or-treating, once a simple, joyful act, was now tinged with fear. The very symbols of the holiday candy, costume, laughter were scrutinized with suspicion. At school, children spoke in hushed tones about the tragedy. Timothy's classmates shared memories of his bright smile and playful energy, while whispering about the danger that had come in such a familiar form. Teachers reassured them, but the innocence of the day had been irrevocably altered. Halloween, once a comforting bedtime story of imagination and play, had become a cautionary tale woven with real-life terror. In court, the trial began with a slow, deliberate passage. Lawyers presented evidence piece by piece. Witnesses recounted the events of that fateful Halloween night. Doctors explained the effects of the poison. Every detail was examined, dissected, disgust. The courtroom itself seemed to breathe with tension, its atmosphere heavy yet quiet. A stark contrast to the chaos that had gripped the neighborhood weeks before. And outside, the public followed closely. Their fascination mingled with horror. Newspapers published every new revelation. Television news aired slow-motion replays of Halloween decorations, candy bowls, and the streets where Timothy had walked. Families in other towns began to share cautionary tales among themselves, teaching children to be wary of strangers and even familiar hands. The narrative of trust, innocence, and joy had been shattered. As you listen now, take a slow breath in and release. Feel the rhythm of your own calm, even as the story unfolds around you. The streets of Houston, the courtroom, the whispers of neighbors, all are now part of the sleep story you are experiencing. It is relaxing, yet tinged with the awareness of shadows, a guided sleep meditation that carries both comfort and caution, wrapping you in layers of thought, emotion, and reflection. Ronald O'Brien, the man who had walked among neighbors, smiled at his children, and blended seamlessly into a community, was now at the center of history. His actions, deliberate and fatal, left ripples far beyond a single family. Halloween, in the aftermath, would never be the same. The holiday had been forever changed in the collective consciousness of America. And so, as we drift further into the story, remember this duality. Even in moments of calm, even in the most peaceful bedtime story, shadows can exist. And sometimes, the darkest shadows are carried in the hands we trust the most. The Candyman's legacy was no longer hidden behind closed doors. It had stepped into the light of history, the scrutiny of justice, and the imagination of a nation forever altered. The courtroom was hushed, the air heavy with anticipation. Outside, cameras clicked and microphones captured whispers. Yet inside, every sound seemed magnified. Lawyers spoke slowly, witnesses recounted their stories in careful tones, and the jury listened with rapt attention. It was a sleep story of sorts, where the rhythm of speech and pause carried a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic quality. Yet beneath the calm cadence lay a tension that was impossible to ignore. Families of the neighborhood sat quietly, clutching programs, the parents of other children, once joyous in their celebration of Halloween, now felt a weight pressing on their shoulders. They listened as Timothy's mother described the laughter of her son, the joy in his eyes as he collected candy, and the final moments of horror that followed. Each word hung in the air like autumn leaves suspended in a still pond, delicate yet fraught with tragedy. Outside the courtroom, the streets were alive with murmurs. Reporters spoke in hushed tones to the camera, their words carrying the weight of shock across the nation. The name Candyman echoed in conversations everywhere, whispered in schools, in churches, in quiet living rooms. This story was no longer a local tale. It had become part of the cultural consciousness, a cautionary legend woven into the fabric of American Halloween. Inside, the defense attempted to paint a picture of a grieving father, a man overwhelmed by debt, yet unaware of the consequences of a single, tragic mistake. The prosecution countered with meticulous detail, presenting receipts, insurance policies, and the collected candy as irrefutable evidence. Each piece of candy, once a symbol of comfort, became a silent witness to betrayal. Ashu, listen. Imagine the slow rhythm of the courtroom, a soft shuffle of papers, the measured footsteps of lawyers, the quiet intake of breath before testimony. Let it carry you like a guided sleep meditation, a calm within which the story unfolds. The tension is palpable, yet it moves with a deliberate, almost musical cadence, allowing you to breathe, to absorb, to drift along with the narrative. Neighbors recalled Halloween night with an unsettling clarity. The streets, once filled with laughter and light, now seemed fragile in memory. Children's costumes, candy bags, carved pumpkins, all symbols of joy, were tainted by fear. Trust in community rituals, once implicit, became uncertain. Parents examined the wrappers of candy in their own homes, wondering if the ordinary could conceal something extraordinary and deadly. The trial unfolded over weeks, each day a mixture of procedure and human emotion. Jurors took meticulous notes, judges maintained solemn composure. Reporters recounted the unfolding drama with an eerie calm, as if narrating a bedtime story with the power to soothe even as it unsettled. And throughout it all, Ronald remained poised. The duality of grief and calculation etched into every movement. Timothy's mother testified with quiet dignity, describing the innocence of her son, the warmth of their family, and the unimaginable horror that followed. Her words were soft, yet they carried the force of truth. The courtroom held its collective breath. Even in this space of formality and order, the undercurrent of human emotion was undeniable. As the day stretched on, the name Candyman became unavoidable. Children spoke it in whispers. Adults repeated it in caution. Halloween itself transformed as communities reconsidered traditions once taken for granted. Trick-or-treating became a careful negotiation of trust and vigilance. Every doorbell, every candy bowl carried the shadow of history, and yet, amidst the horror, there remained an odd, haunting beauty. The fall leaves continued to drift from trees. The sun still set in soft, amber waves across quiet neighborhoods. Life, in its steady rhythm, continued, carrying with it the duality of comfort and fear. Even a story of tragedy, of betrayal, could move with a pace gentle enough to cradle the mind. So, as you rest here, feel the balance, the comforting rhythm of a bedtime story, the reflective depth of a relaxing story, the gentle flow of a guided sleep meditation. Allow yourself to drift with the narrative, aware of shadows, yet safe in the listening. The Candyman's tale, now etched into history, moves through hearts and minds slowly, leaving a lasting impression while the world outside moves in its usual rhythm. By the trial's end, the verdict would forever mark Halloween in America. The Candyman, once a fater, now a symbol of betrayal and horror, would become a story told from one generation to the next. Chilling reminder that even the sweetest traditions can hide the darkest truths. Asterisk. In the months following the trial, the streets of Houston seemed quieter. The autumn winds carried the scent of fallen leaves, but the laughter that once filled the air on Halloween was more subdued. Children trick-or-treated in smaller groups, parents vigilantly clothed, and every candy bowl was inspected before a single treat passed into little hands. The city had absorbed the story of the Candy Man, and its echoes lingered in every home, every street, every porch light. Families spoke in hushed tones about the events, revisiting the details of that fateful night. Parents recounted the tragedy to their children as a cautionary tale, a story designed to teach vigilance and careful trust. The once cozy rhythms of Halloween, the bedtime story of autumn nights, the sleep story of laughter and excitement, had been replaced by a slow, careful narrative where safety and suspicion walked hand in hand. Even the smallest rituals were now tinged with apprehension. Pumpkins were carved, but displayed cautiously. Candies were bought in sealed packages, double-checked, sometimes even shared only among siblings. The magic of the holiday, once a relaxing story of playful imagination, had been shadowed by reality. The community had learned a hard lesson. Even the most familiar faces could harbor darkness, and even the most innocent traditions could be transformed into instruments of harm. Parents spoke of trust differently now. Children's laughter remained, but there was a new awareness, a subtle questioning of the world around them. The innocence of childhood had been slightly eroded, replaced with a vigilant curiosity, a cautious hope that lessons had been learned without extinguishing joy entirely. Guided sleep, meditation exercises became a common tool for parents, helping children unwind and release the lingering fear from the news, the whispers, the stories that had spread far beyond Houston. These quiet moments allowed families to reconnect, to breathe slowly, to remind themselves that despite tragedy, the world still held peace and comfort. The act of recounting the story itself, carefully, became a way to reconcile horror with healing. Communities across the nation reflected on Halloween as never before. School districts revised policies, town councils issued guidelines, and neighbors remained alert, exchanging notes and Yet, in these measures, there was also resilienza, determination to preserve the joy of tradition while acknowledging the potential for harm. The Candyman had left a mark, but he had also strengthened vigilance and care. Historians and cultural commentators noted the impact on American society. The tale of Ronald O'Brien, once a grieving father and then the notorious Candyman, became a study of human behavior, the fragility of trust, and the interplay of tradition and risk. Halloween, in particular, was analyzed as a cultural phenomenon, time of communal celebration, now forever shadowed by one tragic act. Children's bedtime stories, once filled with whimsical monsters and friendly ghosts, now carried a subtle reminder of caution. Even in the quietest homes, the story lived on. Parents would gently guide their children through the legend, describing events in measured tones, the narrative unfolding like a sleep story that calmed even as it educated. The rhythm of words became a gentle anchor. Inhale comfort, exhale fear. Inhale wonder, exhale doubt. The story of the Candyman became, paradoxically, a tool for teaching serenity within awareness. And yet, the legacy was undeniable. The very word Candyman echoed in Halloween conversations, etched into the cultural memory. It reminded adults of the delicate balance between joy and vigilance, between trust and caution. It reminded children that magic could exist alongside danger, and that careful observation could protect innocence without erasing wonder. As you breathe slowly, let the rhythm of this guided sleep meditation carry you into a space where shadows exist but do not overwhelm. Let the streets, the autumn leaves, the quiet Halloween nights guide your imagination. Feel the blend of calm and awareness, the coziest and most peaceful tones, carrying a subtle undertone of caution. Let this story, like all bedtime stories, settle around you, wrapping you in both lesson and comfort. In the end, the Candyman's tale was no longer just about one man or one fateful Halloween. It became a part of American folklore, a reflection of societal fears and hopes, and a reminder that even amidst the darkest moments, families, communities, and traditions could endure, adapt, and continue. And in this delicate balance of shadow and light, of caution and calm, the story drifts to its gentle close, a sleep story carried softly on the autumn wind, leaving hearts both mindful and serene. Even as the trial continued, the streets of Houston carried an unusual hush. Windows glowed softly with warm lamplight, but the laughter of children was measured, cautious, as if even joy must be tempered. The scent of fallen leaves and the crisp autumn air mingled with an unspoken tension that lingered over the neighborhood. Families spoke in quiet tones, sharing stories and warnings. Halloween, once a night of playful abandon, had shifted into a collective reflection, a sleep story, wrapped in both comfort and caution. Parents guided their children through rituals of safety. Candy was inspected carefully. Costumes were chosen with care, and groups of trick-or-treaters moved slowly, hand in hand, accompanied by vigilant adults. The joyous spontaneity of the holiday had been replaced by a deliberate rhythm, almost like a guided sleep meditation, measured, calming in its order, yet shadowed by awareness. Even as children ran from house to house, their excitement was tempered by a subtle reminder: trust must be earned, not assumed. Neighborhoods that once echoed with the chatter of Halloween had adopted an almost ritualistic caution. Porch lights glimmered not just to welcome, but to signal careful observation. Parents whispered across fences, sharing advice and reassurance, while children carried both wonder and wariness in equal measure. The story of the Candyman had reshaped tradition, blending the coziest, most peaceful elements of the holiday with a lingering awareness of its fragility. Inside homes, bedtime routines became moments of reflection. Parents would read stories aloud, allowing children to release the day's tension, their voices soft and deliberate. The tale of Halloween's tragedy was told in gentle tones, as a bedtime story that calmed even as it reminded young listeners of caution. Every pause, every deliberate cadence became part of the lesson how to move through joy without losing sight of safety. Community leaders and school officials began to speak publicly, acknowledging the shadow the Candyman had cast across childhood celebrations. Workshops and safety meetings became common, teaching families to balance freedom with vigilance. Children practiced routes. Adults discussed contingency plans, and together they created a rhythm of Halloween that embraced both wonder and awareness. Cultural commentators reflected on the story, noting how a single act of betrayal could ripple through an entire society. The Candyman had changed the perception of Halloween from a simple celebration into a complex social experience, where joy and fear coexisted. Families, historians, and psychologists explored how the tragedy reshaped tradition, revealing both the resilience and vulnerability of communal rituals. Even as life continued, the legacy lingered. For some, the story became a cautionary tale, whispered on quiet nights, a sleep story that carried both the warmth of familial love and the chill of awareness. For others, it became a symbol of vigilance, a reminder that innocence can coexist with vigilance without extinguishing imagination. Guided sleep meditation techniques were employed to help children navigate these breathing in calm, exhaling fear, and learning that safety and wonder could coexist. The O'Brien family, once the center of tragedy, now embodied both grief and reflection. Timothy's sister Elizabeth grew under the careful guidance of her mother, learning to reconcile joy with caution. The neighborhood watched, supportive yet alert, aware that every celebration now carried the weight of memory. Even the smallest Halloween decorations became symbols of both delight and attentiveness, balancing nostalgia with prudence as you listen. Breathe slowly and deeply. Feel the rhythm of this relaxing story, the gentle ebb and flow of words carrying you through streets and homes, through autumn leaves and glowing pumpkins. Let your mind wander through quiet neighborhoods, sensing both the warmth of family and the shadow of history. The Candyman's tale, though dark, teaches reflection, vigilance, and the enduring power of love and community. And so, the story drifts, soft and steady, through memory and imagination. The streets of Houston, the laughter of children, the careful vigilance of parents, all move like gentle currents in a sleep story guiding the mind toward rest, even as it remembers the lessons of that fateful Halloween. The legacy of the Candyman, Tuk Tragique, is now woven into the rhythm of the season. It whispers in hushed tones across porches, rustles in the fallen leaves, and remains present in every shared moment of joy, tempered with awareness. The courtroom remained a quiet stage for the unfolding drama. Every step, every word was magnified in the hushed room, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lawyers presented evidence methodically, witnesses recounted events with care, and the jury absorbed each detail in silence. It was a sleep story of tension and reflection, a story that carried both instruction and meditation for those listening, guiding them through the shadows of human behavior with gentle precision. Outside, the nation listened. News anchors, with calm yet serious tones, repeated the name again and again, the Candyman. Parents across the country whispered it to one another, sharing the story with caution and care. Halloween, once a night of pure joy, had been transformed in public consciousness. Communities everywhere now viewed the holiday through a new lens, and awareness of fragility. Hidden beneath tradition, the fear lingered, but so did a careful resilience. Families relived their own Halloweens in quiet reflection. Candy bags were inspected more meticulously. Children learned to navigate streets with both excitement and vigilance. Parents balanced joy and caution, teaching children that fun and safety could coexist. Even in the coziest homes, a quiet tension persisted, a gentle reminder that the world could shift in a single night. Yet life continued, softly, deliberately. Inside the courtroom, testimony highlighted the meticulous planning behind the act. Financial records, candy wrappers, and insurance policies told a story of intent, of calculation, hidden beneath the guise of a grieving father. Each piece of evidence was examined slowly, deliberately, allowing listeners to absorb the rhythm, the meticulous unfolding of truth. The story became a guided sleep meditation of human morality, showing how decisions, even those cloaked in normalcy, carry weight beyond immediate perception. The O'Brien family's grief was palpable. Timothy's mother, her hands folded, voice steady but trembling, recounted the joy of her son's last Halloween. Elizabeth, his sister, watched quietly, learning a lesson about loss, trust, and the fragility of childhood innocence. The narrative of the Candyman was no longer a local tragedy, it had become a nationwide cautionary tale. Children everywhere were learning, through whispered bedtime stories, that even familiar hands could sometimes bring danger. As you breathe slowly, allow yourself to drift into this sleep story, into the gentle cadence of words that guide. Reflection. Inhale calm, exhale fear. Feel the rhythm of the courtroom, the hushed neighborhood, the autumn wind outside. Let yourself imagine the quiet streets, the soft glow of pumpkins, and the leaves that rustled under foot symbols of both tradition and careful awareness. Reporters chronicled every moment. Photos of the courtroom, of candy bags, and of Ronald O'Brien's calm demeanor circulated across newspapers and television screens. The story spread rapidly, reinforcing caution while maintaining the memory of childhood wonder. Halloween traditions were scrutinized, yet not abandoned. Joy was balanced with vigilance, imagination tempered by awareness. Even the quietest households carried the lesson of the Candyman. Parents recounted events gently, ensuring children understood the boundaries of trust while still savoring the joy of the holiday. The tale became a bedtime story with dual purpose, a relaxing story that soothed and a lesson that lingered, guiding careful observation without extinguishing playful imagination. And still, the name Candyman resonated, echoing through classrooms, playgrounds, and homes. It reminded children and adults alike that even the most ordinary moments handing out candy, celebrating a tradition, could hold hidden consequences. The story, though dark, had become a thread woven into the cultural consciousness, a quiet reminder of vigilance, awareness, and the resilience of community. As the trial approached its final days, the courtroom and the nation held their breath. Justice, slow and deliberate, was unfolding. The Candyman's fate would become part of the legacy, shaping both public policy and cultural memory. Yet even amidst the darkness of the story, there was a rhythm, a gentle, guiding pulse that allowed listeners to process, reflect, and ultimately find calm. The story of the Candyman, once a private tragedy, had transformed into a shared lesson for the nation. It was a sleep story that balanced horror with reflection, fear with awareness, and grief with resilience. Families carried it quietly in their homes, in soft whispers, in deliberate celebrations, ensuring that the past shaped the future without extinguishing the magic of childhood imagination. The final days of the trial unfolded like the slow turning of autumn leaves. Each piece of evidence presented, each witness statement given, added to the intricate mosaic of truth. The courtroom was quiet, yet alive, a stage where history, grief, and justice intertwined. Even in the calm rhythm of proceedings, an undercurrent of tension lingered, as though the walls themselves held their breath. Outside, the name Candyman reverberated across community. It was whispered in homes, repeated in classrooms, and discussed quietly in neighborhoods. The story of Ronald O'Brien had become an indelible part of American culture, a cautionary tale that reminded adults and children alike that even the most familiar gestures could carry danger. Halloween itself had changed, its joyful chaos tempered by vigilance, its magic now intertwined with caution. Inside the courtroom, every gaze, every gesture was observed and measured. Ronald remained composed, his demeanor calm, almost rehearsed as the final arguments were made. Lawyers presented their closing statements carefully, each word deliberate, each pause calculated. The jury listened intently, absorbing both the factual and emotional weight of the story. And while the evidence was undeniable, the human drama, the grief, the shock, the ripple of consequences hung in the air, palpable, slow-moving, and haunting. As you listen, take a deep, measured breath. Inhale peace, exhale tension. Let the rhythm of this sleep story guide you like a gentle guided sleep meditation. Feel the weight of the autumn air, the quiet of neighborhoods, the soft rustle of leaves outside. Let the story unfold in your mind, moving slowly, deliberately, balancing calm with awareness. Timothy's family sat together, holding each other with quiet strength. Grief remained, but so did resilience. Elizabeth, his sister, watched as justice slowly unfolded, learning lessons of life, loss, and the complexities of human behavior. Parents across the country reflected on their own families, re-examining traditions, teaching children the delicate balance of trust and vigilance. The tragedy had touched countless lives, yet it also fostered empathy, understanding, and a cautious appreciation of safety. The judge's final words echoed softly through the courtroom, deliberate and calm, emphasizing justice, consequence, and reflection. Outside, reporters documented the proceedings, but even as the story spread, communities sought solace. They lit candles on porches, arranged pumpkins with care, and whispered bedtime stories to children, reminding them that even amidst shadows, warmth and safety could exist. The Candyman's legacy was complex. It was fear, caution, grief, and reflection, all intertwined. Parents taught children to enjoy Halloween, yet remain mindful. Communities celebrated together, yet with careful observation. The name Candyman had become both a warning and a lesson, a symbol of vigilance, an echo of tragedy, and a reminder of the fragility of trust. And yet, within the darkness, there remained light. Families gathered, homes glowed softly with the warmth of lamps, and children, cradled by parents, drifted toward sleep. The lessons of the story were embedded, not in fear alone, but in awareness, love, and the enduring rhythms of family and community. Even the most chilling tales could become tools for teaching resilience and mindfulness. The story fades. Allow yourself to drift into a peaceful sleep. Let the autumn wind, the quiet streets, the gentle glow of pumpkins guide your imagination. Feel the coziest, most calming presence wrapping around you. The tragedy, the shadows, the caution, they exist, but they do not overwhelm. You are safe, serene, and embraced by the gentle flow of this bedtime story. And as you rest, remember to subscribe to Midnight Murmurs Radio, where each tale, whether eerie, reflective, or magical, guides you gently into dreams. Good night, and may your sleep be calm, restorative, and filled with wonder.